She was an Omega, the lowest rank, the invisible servant. The wolf society had decided was worthless. He was the Alpha King, powerful, commanding, destined for greatness. When the mate bond ignited between them at the royal moon ceremony, it should have elevated her from nothing to everything. Instead, he looked at her with disgust and destroyed her before the entire kingdom. Exiled and hunted, she was left to die in the forbidden forest. But a rival king found her broken body, powerful, commanding, destined for greatness. When the mate bond ignited between them at the royal moon ceremony, it should have elevated her from nothing to everything. Instead, he looked at her with disgust and destroyed her before the entire kingdom. Exiled and hunted, she was left to die in the forbidden forest. But a rival king found her broken body and saw not weakness, but untapped power. When she returned to that grand hall months later, no longer cowering, no longer ashamed, draped in emerald, silk and wielding ancient magic at the side of a golden-haired king, the Alpha who'd thrown her away felt the echo of their shattered bond. But this time, she held all the power, and he would have to prove he deserved even a single moment of her attention. Elara never imagined the most important night of her life would begin while she was trying to disappear. The royal moon ceremony was always overwhelming. Hundreds of elite wolves from across the realm, radiating status and strength. Omegas like her attended only to serve, not to be seen. She moved through the glittering hall like a ghost, dark curls pinned tight, emerald eyes fixed firmly on the floor, balancing silver trays of wine for wolves who never acknowledged her existence. The great hall blazed with 1,000 candles, the nobility of the Dark Moon Kingdom, dressed in silks and jewels that cost more than her entire pack earned in a year. Then it happened. A surge of energy so violent it drove her to her knees. Wine, glasses shattering across marble floors. The sacred mate bond, snapping into place like a lightning strike directly to her soul. Her wolf erupted in desperate joy, howling the word she'd never dared hope to hear, mate. She lifted her head, emerald eyes tracking that irresistible pull across the crowded hall, and found him. Alpha King Daemon, dark-haired, devastating, draped in ceremonial black that emphasized his raw power. For one perfect shining heartbeat, their eyes locked, and Elara glimpsed salvation. She was catastrophically wrong. What came next would destroy her utterly, but also remake her into something legendary. The grand hall of the Dark Moon Kingdom blazed with silver moonlight streaming through crystalline windows, casting ethereal shadows across marble floors, polished to mirror brightness. Elara moved along the periphery like a ghost, her tray of wine goblets balanced perfectly despite her trembling hands. The royal moon ceremony attracted the most powerful alphas and betas from every pack, wolves whose very presence made the air thick with dominance. And here she was, an Omega, invisible except when someone needed their glass refilled. She'd learned long ago to make herself small, to avoid eye contact, to breathe shallowly so her scent wouldn't offend. Tonight was supposed to be like every other ceremony she'd served at. Survive until dawn, then disappear back into the kitchens where she belonged. Then the world tilted. It struck like lightning splitting a tree, sudden, violent, undeniable. The mate bond snapped into place with such force that Elara gasped, her tray clattering to the floor. Every nerve in her body ignited, pulling her attention inexorably toward the dais where Alpha King Daemon stood. Their eyes met across the crowded hall, and for one breathless moment, hope bloomed in her chest like a flower breaking through concrete. He was magnificent, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and eyes like polished onyx. And he was hers. The moon goddess had chosen her, worthless Omega Elara, to be mate to a king. But the wonder in Daemon's expression curdled instantly into something else. Revulsion twisted his features as he scented what she was. The bond that sang so sweetly in her veins seemed to strangle him. He stepped forward, his voice cutting through the sudden silence like a blade. The moon goddess has made an error. Each word fell heavy as stone. I cannot, will not, accept an Omega as my mate. The hall erupted in shocked whispers that quickly shifted to murmurs of agreement. Of course not, someone said clearly. An Omega Queen? Impossible. Elara couldn't breathe, couldn't move. The bond between them pulsed frantically, begging him to reconsider, but his face remained carved from ice. I, Daemon, Alpha King of the Dark Moon Kingdom, reject the bond with this Omega. He practically spat the word. She is unworthy to stand beside any Alpha, let alone a king. The rejection hit like a physical blow. The bond didn't simply break. It shattered, splintering into 1,000 razor-sharp pieces that shredded through her soul. Elara collapsed, a scream tearing from her throat as agony consumed her. This was worse than any beating, worse than starvation, worse than every moment of suffering in her miserable life combined into one endless torment. Rough hands grabbed her arms, dragging her backward. Through her haze of pain, she heard them, the nobles laughing, sneering, celebrating that their king had been saved from such a disgraceful fate. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was Daemon's face, utterly unmoved by her anguish, already turning away as if she'd never existed at all. Dawn broke cold and merciless as guards shoved Elara through the kingdom's gates. The forbidden forest loomed ahead, a wall of twisted trees and shadows where even alphas feared to tread. They gave her nothing but the torn dress she'd worn to the ceremony, still stained with wine from her dropped tray, and a mocking piece of advice. You have until sunset. Run fast, Omega. She ran. Every step sent fresh agony through the bond's ruins, as if Daemon's rejection continued to echo through her body with each heartbeat. The forest swallowed her quickly, branches clawing at her skin, roots threatening to trip her already unsteady feet. She had no destination, no plan beyond the animal instinct to survive just one more hour, one more minute. By midday she heard them, wolves moving through the underbrush with predatory grace. Not the sounds of an escort ensuring her departure, these were hunters stalking prey. Elara pressed herself against a massive oak, lungs burning, and caught fragments of conversation carried on the wind. The king says no one can know an Omega was his mate, Beta Marcus's voice, cold and efficient. Loose ends must be tied. Understanding crashed over her like ice water. Daemon hadn't simply rejected her. He'd ordered her execution. Terror gave her broken body, new strength. She fled deeper into the forest, branches tearing at her dress, stones cutting her bare feet. Behind her, the warriors gave chase, their howls promising violence. They were trained killers. She was an Omega who'd never been taught to fight, who'd spent her life learning only how to serve and submit and disappear. The cliff appeared without warning. One moment, the ground was solid beneath her feet. The next, it vanished. Elara's scream cut short as she plummeted through empty air, her body smashing against rock face before she crashed into the ravine below. Something snapped in her chest. Her leg bent at an impossible angle. Blood filled her mouth, hot and copper bright. Above, she heard the warriors reach the cliff's edge. Heard them peer down into the darkness. Heard Beta Marcus say, "She's done. No one survives that fall. Let's go." Their footsteps faded. Elara lay broken on stone and dead leaves, staring up at the thin strip of sky visible between ancient trees. Cold seeped into her bones, stealing what little warmth remained. Her vision blurred, darkness creeping in from the edges. He was right, she thought with bitter clarity. I was never worthy of anything. Her eyes began to close. But just before consciousness slipped away entirely, something appeared above the ravine. A golden light, impossibly bright, descending toward her like a falling star. She tried to focus on it, tried to understand, but the darkness was faster. Everything went black. The golden-haired Alpha found her purely by chance, or perhaps by fate. Kieran, Alpha King of the Northern Realm, had been conducting routine border patrols when an inexplicable pull drew him toward the ravine. He'd learned long ago to trust his instincts, especially the ones that hummed with magical resonance. What he discovered at the bottom made his blood run cold. She lay crumpled like a discarded doll, her body broken in ways that should have killed her hours ago. Yet her heart still beat, faint but persistent, and around her unconscious form swirled traces of golden energy, so subtle most wolves would never detect it. Kieran knelt beside her, careful not to jostle her injuries, and felt power emanating from her like heat from dying embers. He gathered her into his arms with infinite care and ran. His castle's healers swarmed the moment he burst through the doors, their faces grave as they catalogued her injuries: shattered ribs, fractured skull, internal bleeding, hypothermia. One of them, an elderly wolf named Moira, looked up at Kieran with troubled eyes. "She should be dead, Your Majesty. These wounds, no one survives this." Moira's hand hovered over Elara's chest. "But something is keeping her alive, something I've never encountered before." "Magic," Kieran said quietly. "Latent abilities, I think. Untrained and unconscious, but fighting to preserve her." The healers exchanged shocked glances. Such gifts were rare, thought lost generations ago, when the old bloodlines faded. To find them in a wolf so gravely injured, in a place so remote, it defied explanation. For 3 days, Kieran visited constantly, drawn by curiosity that evolved into something deeper. He sat beside her bed, watching healers work their craft, sensing the magical energy within her growing stronger as her body mended. Who was she? What had brought her to his borders more dead than alive? And why did something in him recoil at the thought of her returning to wherever she'd come from? On the 4th morning, her eyes opened. Elara stared up at the unfamiliar ceiling, then at the golden-haired stranger sitting beside her bed. He had kind blue eyes, nothing like Daemon's cold obsidian, and when he smiled, it reached those eyes with genuine warmth. "You're safe now," Kieran said softly, "and you're far more than you know." Her voice emerged as a rasp. "Where?" "The Northern Realm. I'm Kieran." He poured water, helping her drink. "My healers say you're a miracle. The injuries you survived shouldn't have been survivable." "I'm just an Omega." The words came automatically, a truth beaten into her over years. Kieran's expression shifted, something fierce entering his gaze. "You're not just anything. That rank is a cage, not a truth." He leaned forward. "Whatever brought you to death's door, whoever hurt you, they were fools. I can sense the magic in you. You're extraordinarily rare." Elara stared at him, disbelief warring with something she'd thought died in that ravine, something that felt dangerously like hope. Recovery came slowly, measured in weeks of aching muscles and bones knitting themselves back together. Kieran visited daily, bringing books on ancient magic and bloodline gifts, sitting in the chair beside her bed as if he had nowhere more important to be. For a king, he possessed remarkable patience. On the 10th day, Elara finally told him everything. The words spilled out like poison from a wound. The mate bond, Daemon's public rejection, the assassination order disguised as exile. She watched Kieran's expression darken with each revelation, his usual warmth hardening into something deadly. "Daemon always was a fool," he said quietly, "but this surpasses all expectations." His blue eyes found hers. He threw away something precious because he couldn't see past a designation that means nothing. "It means everything," Elara whispered. Omegas are wolves who've been systematically oppressed to maintain an artificial hierarchy." Kieran's voice held certainty. "Stay, train, discover what you really are beneath what they told you to be." The training began as soon as she could walk without limping. At first, Elara was pathetic, weak and clumsy, her body still remembering broken bones and starvation. Kieran's warriors went easy on her, which somehow made it worse. But she persisted, driven by something darker than ambition. Every bruise was proof she could survive pain. Every successful block was a small victory against the voice in her head that whispered she was worthless. The magic revealed itself during a training accident. A warrior's strike came too fast. Elara threw up her hands in panic, and suddenly vines erupted from the training ground, forming a barrier between them. The warrior stumbled back, shocked. Around them, flowers bloomed out of season, responding to her fear and desperate need for protection. Kieran approached slowly, wonder written across his features. "Lunar magic," he breathed, "the ability to channel the moon goddess's power itself. Elara, do you understand how rare this is?" She stared at her trembling hands, where faint silver light still flickered. He brought in his most skilled warriors after that, fighters who could help her harness both physical and magical abilities. Months blurred together in a haze of training, studying, and slow transformation. The gaunt, broken girl from the ravine disappeared, replaced by someone lean and vital, with muscles earned through sweat and determination. The day she finally defeated Kieran's beta in sparring, the training yard erupted in cheers. But it was the private moments Elara treasured most, evenings when Kieran would find her in the library, bringing tea and conversation. The way he looked at her had changed, intensity replacing curiosity. And something in her chest, in the space where a shattered bond once lived, began to warm again. She caught him staring one evening, and he didn't look away. "You're extraordinary," he said simply. For the first time in her life, Elara almost believed it. 6 months transformed everything. Elara stood before a group of young warriors, correcting their stances with the confidence of someone who'd earned every piece of knowledge through blood and bruises. They listened with respect that would have been unthinkable in her old life, not because she demanded it, but because she'd proven herself worthy of it. When she demonstrated a complex combination of physical strikes and magical defense, calling vines to entangle practice dummies while moving through combat forms, the warriors watched with something like awe. From the training yard's edge, Kieran watched too, pride evident in the slight smile that curved his lips. Her magic had grown beyond simple defensive reactions. Now she could make entire gardens bloom with a thought, could call moonlight to illuminate dark corners, could sense the natural world around her like an extension of her own body. The power that had kept her alive in that ravine had been waiting all along for someone to teach her it was allowed to exist. That evening, they met in the library, as had become their habit. Ancient texts on lunar magic lay scattered across the table between them, their research into her abilities both fascinating and frustrating in its incompleteness. Kieran reached for the same book she did, and their hands touched. The electricity was instantaneous. Not the violent snap of a mate bond, but something warmer, something chosen rather than fated. Elara's breath caught as his fingers curled around hers. "You've become essential to me," Kieran said softly, his blue eyes holding hers. "To this kingdom, yes, but more than that. Essential to me." Elara realized with startling clarity that she hadn't thought of Daemon in weeks. The broken bond that once burned like acid had faded to nothing more than a distant scar. What she felt now, looking at Kieran, was entirely new, built on respect and trust and genuine care rather than mystical compulsion. "I feel the same," she whispered. He kissed her in the garden under moonlight that seemed to glow brighter at her happiness, her magic responding to emotions she'd never been allowed to feel. His hands cupped her face with reverence, as if she were something precious rather than disposable. The moment shattered when his beta burst through the garden doors, urgent and apologetic. "Your Majesty, forgive the interruption. A summons has arrived. The Alliance Summit. All major Alpha Kings required to attend for peace treaty negotiations." He hesitated. "It's being held in the Dark Moon Kingdom." Ice flooded Elara's veins. "I can't go back there." Kieran turned to her, taking both her hands. "You won't go as an Omega in hiding. You'll go as my equal, my most trusted advisor." His voice rang with certainty. "I don't see an Omega when I look at you, Elara. I never have. I see power, wisdom, and a woman who survived what should have destroyed her. Come with me. Stand at my side. Let them see what they threw away." Fear and courage warred in her chest. Finally, she squeezed his hands. "Yes." The journey to the Dark Moon Kingdom felt simultaneously endless and far too short. Elara watched familiar landscapes pass by the carriage window, her stomach twisting tighter with each mile. Kieran's hand found hers in the darkness between them, warm and steady. "Remember what you are now," he said, quietly. She closed her eyes, feeling the magic humming beneath her skin, the strength in muscles that had been forged through months of relentless training. She was not the same broken girl who'd been dragged from these lands half dead, but knowing it and believing it were different things entirely. The castle appeared on the horizon like a dark crown against the sky, and Elara's breath caught, despite herself. Her handmaidens had transformed her into someone unrecognizable. The emerald gown hugged her lean frame like liquid silk, its color making her eyes luminous. Silver jewelry, crafted by northern artisans and infused with subtle protective enchantments, adorned her throat and wrists. Her dark curls had been arranged in an elegant style that would have been forbidden to an Omega, cascading over one bare shoulder. When she'd looked in the mirror, she'd seen a stranger, someone powerful, someone worthy of standing beside a king. The grand hall blazed with the same silver moonlight she remembered, but everything felt different from this side of the doors. She entered on Kieran's arm, her chin high, and felt the weight of every gaze turning toward them like flowers following the sun. The whispers started immediately. Who is she? The Northern King's companion? Those eyes, like emeralds and moonlight. Formal reception proceeded with diplomatic precision, each Alpha King presenting their delegations. Lesser rulers she'd once served wine to now looked at her with curiosity rather than dismissal. She was no longer invisible. She was seen. Then came Kieran's turn. Alpha King Daemon, Kieran's voice rang clear across the hall. May I present Lady Elara, Lunar Mage, and my chief advisor. Daemon's wine glass exploded in his hand. Elara watched with detached fascination as color drained from his face, watched recognition and disbelief war in his obsidian eyes. He looked exactly as she remembered. Tall, commanding, devastatingly handsome. Beside him stood a high-ranking beta woman in expensive silks, his arranged fiancée, who looked between them with growing confusion and jealousy. The broken mate bond echoed faintly, like hearing music from another room, but it held no power over her. Just recognition. Two wolves who once shared something neither wanted. Their eyes met across the hall. Elara felt nothing. No love, no hatred, no desperate need for validation or revenge. Just empty recognition of someone who'd once hurt her badly, now rendered irrelevant by time and healing. She inclined her head with cool politeness, the gesture one might give any stranger, then turned her attention away as if he were simply part of the decor. It was Daemon who stood frozen, Daemon who couldn't speak, Daemon whose control shattered like his wine glass. Kieran squeezed her hand gently, pride evident in his smile. She was free. The summit negotiations revealed what Elara had become in ways mere appearances could not. When territorial disputes threatened to derail the peace treaty, she stepped forward with solutions that wove magic and diplomacy together. Her ability to sense the land's natural boundaries, to show, through manifestations of lunar magic, where territories truly began and ended, left the assembled Alpha Kings speechless. Even the most skeptical rulers found themselves nodding at her wisdom, her intelligence undeniable. Through it all, Daemon watched. His obsidian eyes followed her every movement, his arranged fiancée forgotten beside him, his contributions to negotiations distracted and half-formed. She found him waiting in the gardens that evening. Elara. Her name on his lips sounded like a prayer or a curse. He emerged from the shadows, and she noted with satisfaction that he looked haggard, as if he hadn't slept in days. I felt it the moment I saw you, the bond. It's still there, damaged but present. You destroyed it. Her voice remained cold, steady. You chose your pride over destiny. I was wrong. Desperation crept into his words. I see that now. Look at what you've become. Magnificent, powerful, everything a queen should be. I didn't become this for you, Elara interrupted, anger finally breaking through her composure. I became this despite you, despite being thrown away like garbage, despite your warriors hunting me for sport, despite nearly dying in a ravine because you couldn't bear for anyone to know an Omega had been your mate. Elara, is there a problem? Kieran's voice cut through the tension as he appeared on the garden path, his hand immediately finding the small of Elara's waist. The gesture was protective, but calm. A king who didn't need to prove his strength through aggression. Daemon's face contorted with rage. She was mine by right of the mate bond. You rejected that right. Kieran's blue eyes held no warmth now. She owes you nothing. The evening's banquet should have been a celebration of successful negotiations, but tension crackled through the hall like lightning, waiting to strike. Daemon drank too heavily, his gaze never leaving Elara, even as his fiancée tried desperately to reclaim his attention. When Kieran leaned close to whisper something that made Elara laugh, something inside Daemon seemed to break. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against marble with jarring violence. I invoke the right of reclamation. Shocked gasps rippled through the assembled nobles. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the musicians faltered into silence. The high priestess stepped forward from the shadows where she'd been observing, her ancient face grave. Alpha King Daemon, this right hasn't been invoked in centuries. Do you understand what you're asking? I understand perfectly. Daemon's voice rang with desperate determination. The right of reclamation allows a rejected mate to challenge for reclaiming rights. I invoke it now, before these witnesses. Elara's blood turned to ice. She knew this law, ancient, nearly forgotten, but still binding under the moon goddess's covenant. If Daemon succeeded in the challenges the right demanded, magical law itself would compel her return to him. Kieran's hand tightened on hers. This isn't over, he murmured. We'll find a way. But the high priestess was already nodding, bound by laws older than any kingdom. The right is invoked. Let the challenges begin. The high priestess's explanation sent chills through every witness assembled in the grand hall. The right of reclamation is not merely physical combat, she intoned, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. It is a trial judged by the moon goddess herself. Both kings must demonstrate why they are worthy of the bond. The ceremony will take place in the sacred lunar temple at moonrise tomorrow. I should have a choice in this. Elara's voice cracked with fury and fear. You're treating me like property to be claimed. The high priestess turned to her, and something like sympathy flickered in ancient eyes. You will. Have a choice, child. The goddess will weigh your heart's truth along with theirs. She sees what mortal law cannot. The lunar temple stood atop the highest cliff, open to the sky where moonlight pooled like liquid silver. Every Alpha King, every dignitary from the summit formed a circle around the sacred ground. Elara stood between the high priestess and her attendants, her heart hammering as Daemon and Kieran took their positions. Daemon radiated aggressive confidence, his power rolling off him in waves. Kieran remained calm, centered, his blue eyes finding Elara's across the space with reassurance she desperately needed. The moon rose, full and impossibly bright. "Let the trials begin," the high priestess declared. Magical combat erupted first, a test of strength where both kings demonstrated their power without causing permanent harm. Daemon fought with brutal efficiency, his attacks designed to overwhelm and dominate. Each strike carried the weight of an alpha who'd never questioned his right to take what he wanted. Kieran moved differently, controlled, precise, his skill honed through discipline rather than entitlement. He didn't just defend, he adapted, reading Daemon's patterns and countering with elegant effectiveness. The combat ended in a draw, both kings bloodied but standing. "Now," the high priestess commanded, "demonstrate your worthiness. What would you give for this bond?" Daemon stepped forward, his voice ringing with conviction. "I would make her queen, the highest in the land, wealth beyond measure, status that none could challenge, power to command armies. I would give her everything." The moonlight seemed to dim slightly, unimpressed. Kieran moved next, and when he spoke, his words were quiet but absolute. "I offer nothing but what I've already given, freedom to choose, space to grow, partnership as equals. I offer her autonomy." He turned to face Elara directly. "I don't fight to own her. I fight for her right to never be owned. Again." The moon blazed suddenly brilliant, and presence flooded the temple, ancient, feminine, impossibly vast. The moon goddess herself manifested as silver light that coalesced into semi-solid form, her voice echoing in every mind simultaneously. "One offers a cage of gold," the goddess pronounced. "One offers wings." Magical backlash struck Daemon like lightning, driving him to his knees. He screamed as the judgment tore through him, his unworthiness laid bare before divine power. The goddess turned to Elara, and silver light wrapped around her chest where the broken bond had festered. "I sever what should never have been broken this way. I free you completely." The last echo of the mate bond dissolved like morning mist, leaving only peace. The moon goddess's light faded slowly, but something remained, a silver glow emanating from Elara herself, power transferred as benediction. She stood taller, radiant with divine blessing, no longer merely freed, but transformed. "The bond is severed eternally," the high priestess proclaimed to the assembled witnesses. "The Omega is free." "No," Elara's voice rang clear through the temple, every head turned toward her. "I'm not just free, I choose." She stepped forward and took Kieran's hand, her fingers weaving through his with deliberate intent. Before every Alpha King, every noble, every witness who'd come to see her, claimed like property, she made her declaration. Daemon's face crumpled, not with rage this time, but with devastating comprehension. He'd lost not just the trial, but any possibility of redemption. His arranged fiancée appeared at his side, and surprisingly, there was compassion in her touch as she led him away from the sacred ground. Perhaps she understood, better than most, what it meant to be chosen for practicality rather than love. "I choose Kieran," Elara continued, her voice steady and sure. "Not because destiny demands it, but because he saw worth in me when I couldn't see it myself. Because he offered freedom instead of cages, partnership instead of possession." Kieran's blue eyes shone with emotion as he dropped to one knee before her, reversing every expectation of hierarchy. "Then be my queen," he said, "not by fate, but by choice, as my equal, as my partner, as my love." "Yes." The word came easily, joyfully. "As your equal, as your partner, as your love." Their kiss, witnessed by all kingdoms, felt like sealing not just a personal vow, but a promise of change itself. 6 months later, the joint coronation united two kingdoms under a new banner, one where worth wasn't determined by designation, but by character. Elara stood beside Kieran wearing dual crowns, queen and lunar mage, her emerald eyes surveying changes that would have been impossible a year ago. New laws protecting Omegas had been enacted across both kingdoms. Omega children now trained in combat and magic alongside Alphas and Betas, their potential no longer suffocated by artificial limitations. The training yards rang with voices that had once been silenced, and hope bloomed where only resignation had existed before. News reached them that Daemon had found unexpected peace with his arranged match. Humility, it seemed, was teaching him what arrogance never could. Elara felt no satisfaction in his suffering, no triumph in his loss. Only quiet gratitude that his cruelty had inadvertently led her to something genuine. In the castle gardens, now lush beyond nature's normal limits, responding to her magic, Elara used her lunar magic to bless the newest generation of children. Silver light danced around them, each child glowing momentarily with potential waiting to unfold. Kieran watched from nearby, love evident in every line of his expression. "My queen, my choice, my heart." She turned to him, smiling with the freedom of someone who'd survived death and discovered life on the other side. "My king, my savior, my home." True power, they'd learned, came not from domination, but from lifting others up. And love, real love, was always a choice.